indicated by the presence of the Acting Portfolio Director. So Julie Brooks sends her apologies, as does Alex, but we're glad to see you here, so thank you for that. Unless there are any items that anybody wishes to address at the start, I shall ask, does anybody believe there to be a conflict of interest in their being present here? Excellent. Right, if we go through the minutes of 25 January, first for accuracy, page 1, 2. They were forwarded. Maybe if you look over Catherine's shoulder. There was a while ago. Yeah. An accurate record, which takes us to matters arising. The first is action Alpha 7, which is to give an update on the approvals of the Ascension interview suite, and that's on the Chief.
The ABE suite work is still continuing. The work, I mentioned in the report, the work for the custody suite itself has now been completed. The FCDO funding for the CCTV was spent, and that was installed nearly 2 months ago now.
And you are happy, Simon? Okay, got it. Thank you. The next?
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Next one is action A12, which is a combined action on statistics, which is the inclusion of additional statistics and detection details, historical cases, clarification on police, non-police reporting categories. This one is also on the...
Yeah, I've once again amended the crime figures, and I'll make some comments about that when we get to that point, if that's okay, sir.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you. And then the final outstanding action is on both you, David, and Sam, which is the police and crime panel reports to be published on the SSHA website after meetings, and printed versions to be put in the library and customer services centre as soon as done.
That was done, and the library made a request for a PowerPoint presentation version of them for after this. Was the library, wasn't it? That was about me. Yeah, so that they can.
Press release was amended to mention with they are now going to be online as well.
Excellent. That's really, really good news, and continues the aim of seeking to ensure that we have as wide a distribution as possible, including the filming of the actual meeting itself. That takes us really then to the meat of today's meeting, which is the report from the Chief. David, if I may hand to you.
Thank you, sir. This report predominantly covers January to March, although because of the lag in the Ascension Island figures, their figures are from a slightly different period from November to February. Past 3 months have been fairly steady. There hasn't been any particular events of note, although we've had several cruise ships that peak of the tourist season. We had 46 reports of antisocial behaviour during these 3 months. There's no real common threads amongst that. They are the usual things of variation of dogs, noise, inappropriate messaging on social media, which I think is probably going to be a growth area. No particular areas. Castle Gardens, without wishing to tempt fate, has been very peaceful these last few months, so that's nice. So it is the way it is. The work on the abandoned 999 course seems to have had some effect. We've had a fall in the number of accidental 999 calls. We will always have some, but the numbers have gone down, and the publicity and the practice of calling everybody back to confirm it obviously is still carrying on. There was no antisocial behaviour on Ascension. Violent crime has risen in our terms pretty significantly compared to last year. There were 24 offences on St Helena during the last 3 months, and only 15 in the same period last year. In addition, there were 3 violent offences on Ascension in the period from November to February, which isn't an outlier. It's hard to pin a reason on that. Part of it is certain things are being more reported, and I'll come to that in a minute with domestic violence. But it's worthy of note that the numbers are going up. Similarly, with Sexual offences, we had 10 offences in 3 months, none of which are historic. They're all related to sexual offences other than rape, and perhaps not surprisingly, but still disappointingly, the number of online offences continues to trawl through. But we are also still having contact offences as well during that period of time. But 10 in 3 months is very high compared to what we would expect. Domestic violence, we've had 9 domestic violence and 1 other domestic incident during the period covered. Again, the number of domestic violence incidents recorded, and I'll come to it when we look at the infographics in a minute, but the number of domestic violence incidents recorded in the past year has gone up. Personally, I don't believe that's because there's more domestic violence. I think it's just because we're actually trying to start to make the progress and get more people to report it. It's a reflection on the education programme that we've been doing, the DASH training that we've been doing, and I like to think that people actually have the confidence that bringing the police is a good idea when they're faced with domestic violence now. So, as I've mentioned repeatedly, it's still underreported here, as is the case in the whole world, but we can take some positive from the increased numbers anyway. I did touch then on the DASH training. I have to make the case that we're still offering that training out, but the numbers of people attending it have dropped very significantly over the last few months. Otherwise, in relation to vulnerable people, we've seen a notable increase in individuals with mental health needs coming to our attention, the best example of which is in the past month we've had 3 people detained under Section 21 in the Mental Health and Mental Capacity Ordinance. That's more than we normally get the whole year. So it is an area that I think is going to need careful monitoring for the future. Obviously, we will only use that and take them straight to hospital if we're convinced that it's mental health issues and there are no criminal issues. They will come into police custody otherwise and be assessed. But it is, as I say, it is very unusual, certainly in my experience here, to have had that frequency of mental health issues within a period of time.
I think before we move on, I think it is just worth pausing on the fact that we are seeing these increased indicators. It is concerning. As with all things, crime, things that come to the attention of the police are a consequence of multiple factors, and often it's not about enforcement, it's about the underlying factors that lead to the offending in the first place. And, I'm not going to proffer a view on what that might be, but I think this is something we need to keep a very close eye on, because if it continues in this direction, we might need to consider what other actions are required to address this. That will largely be a political thing. It'll be for the next government from September, given the timeframes. And I just hope that, I hope this is an aberration, but if we see this as an ongoing trend, then that is of concern. I don't know if anybody else wishes to make a comment.
Is it the people who have some aware of being on sentence is 72 hours, actually? But what happens after that's a significant point?
That's a question you would have to direct to the health service. In these instances, they've been taken there because they've not committed any criminal offences, but their behaviour is of such concern that they would go in. If there were a criminal offence, then obviously once their mental health issues have been dealt with, then criminal matters can carry on. But with this, then I would imagine they're under treatment plans and various other bits and pieces, but
it's so when they don't want to comply, don't feel they need to comply, and then they commit more disturbance. I know they're not offences, but what?
Well, I mean, the disturbances can still be offences, but it's I say the reason I've raised it is because it's unusual that we've had that. We have a number of people every year who are coming to custody and are given, as part of their health assessment, they will also have a mental health assessment. That just happens naturally, but this is unusual to have this, to be seeing this behaviour in a public place as a result, potentially, of mental health issues.
What we're asking around the health and what policies do they have in place for this?
Well, as I say, health have in the ordinance they have the power to detain for up to 72 hours for treatment and assessment. At the end of that detention can be extended if they wish.
So
that's a health issue.
I think what I'm trying to ask is,
Yeah.
we have meetings with health. Have they looked at any policies that we wish to bring in so we can tackle the issue?
Part of the discussions we've had with health is the island does not have any secure mental health accommodation. That is not a matter that can be addressed. From my perspective, it's something that the island needs to decide whether or not it's to prioritise it. Without secure mental health accommodation, it becomes very challenging to detain somebody against their will, if that's what is necessary. A police station, we have in the past discussed in various situations the use of the police station and the police cells for that, but it is not an appropriate secure accommodation for anything more than the immediate crisis term, certainly not for any length of time, and certainly not for up to 72 hours.
So I get it, it's not a police issue, but I think from my perspective, this is from a policing perspective, it'd be nice to know what health are doing so it makes it better for policing. So they know that going through is some sort of policy direction and what's going to happen with mental health issues.
Just if I can interject on this, I've obviously come across several people who have suffered with mental health difficulties who and I've had to make decisions as to whether or not they should be prosecuted. Some of them have, some of them haven't. But it's not all, and obviously the level of somebody's mental health difficulty can obviously affect the public interest as to whether or not it is in the public interest to prosecute them. That will depend on how much their mental health difficulty affects their culpability. We also have to take into account things like the nature of the offence, and the more serious it is, the more likelihood there is a prosecution. But if not, that people with mental health, there's often reasons why many people fall into the criminal justice system, and mental health is one of them. It might well be that many defendants have mental health difficulties which haven't called for the crisis response that David has mentioned, but all I know is that there are people within the health service, and particularly community society action nurses, whose input into any case involving anybody, any suspected criminal or charged criminal who has mental health difficulties, their input is invaluable both to myself, to the police and to the court. So the health do have a massive input and a massive say as to how people are dealt with, and I think that the focus, if the court are choosing to deal with people, and when they do, the focus tends to be on rehabilitation rather than simply putting, it's not the best thing sometimes just to say a custodial sentence is appropriate, and any community-based penalties are structured around that mental health, and without the support of health we're not able to do that. There are those difficulties there where people, like you've said, we can't deal with that. I know from having spoken to them that if they had the facility to keep people in for longer term, they wouldn't, they just don't. So that's the situation that we're in. But certainly the court, there are also several options available to the courts in dealing with people with mental health difficulties, and disposals that are focused around ensuring that people are treated. Particularly if they're not willing to do so, then there's human rights implications, so on and so forth. But as far as I'm aware, that there is a good, the way in which there's good way, there are plenty of ways that we can deal with people within the system, and often, but the root causes of mental health problems and what leads to them are so vast and widespread that when you talk about police tackling the problem, I don't think it's very, how can the police tackle an issue as to what leads to mental health, because the reasons that lead to mental health difficulties are so far and wide, aren't they? That's the only point that I would make.
I don't think that's on there. I was just thinking more about health side. What's the political policy direction for those people need protection? And you need to get things in place for them, such as secure bases and so forth. If things are going up, and the chances are one of more issues going forward, then there needs to be some policy directions that will then basically inform the next level and forward as to which you get on what direction you should go in.
I wouldn't disagree, and with respect, I would probably suggest it might be worth bringing this report to the attention of your ministerial colleague for him to be aware of this. It is one of those, it's a broader community issue, mental health as has been described, and I'm not anything like a mental health expert, but I think it's reasonable to suggest, as Simon has, that there are multiple factors that lead to mental health issues, but the issue is how do we deal with it? And it's the paucity of capacity here, whether that be secure for somebody who's a hazard to themselves or other people, or whether that just be dealing with the consequences of it. So if you feel it appropriate, as I said, Minister, maybe we'll bring it to the attention of your colleague. I think what I'm sort of picking up, with not seeking to repeat myself, mental health is one component, but when I look at the rise in violent crime and I look in the rise of sexual offences, they're typically emblematic of deeper issues. And I think that is something, as I say, let's see where we are in the next report, but if we're seeing an increasing trend, then recognising we're in the last 2 months of this government, but this may be something that a subsequent government needs to recognise in how it proceeds. The police are sort of one of these combat indicators. They show what's beginning to happen on the ground. They don't tell you why, they just show it's beginning to happen. And it's often a far more detailed and broader policy and political consideration about what you do once you start to see these indicators.
So, as I see, this is all I was going to use later on, probably do that now. Probably also need broader picture as well. So if you look at that over the last 10, 24 years of what about how the crime has been growing. And then sometimes you sit them down and things small step. Other things it's increasing or it's decreasing when you look at it over a period of time. You could be down and off, down maybe, yeah, but it could be up here. So it's best to see the whole picture. But I'm also mindful of the very difference between this all going out of media. And we wouldn't want people to be listening and thinking, well, some of the stuff on the grassroots hunting, they don't know the full context. So it's best to look at the full context, and then there are always sanctions listed now in the very microwave. But this is increasing. But when you look at over a period of people, this might not be, or it might be, and we should be raising those perhaps in a way if it's definitely increasing compared to what it used to be.
Context is something I entirely agree with. I mean, we now have the beginning of a fairly good database on what's going on, although I know you've been recording crime statistics for some considerable time. I don't know if you want to go specifically.
I mean, I don't disagree, Minister. The numbers we're dealing with are still very, very small. And trying to extrapolate long-term trends from them is difficult because you can have a massive percentage increase by going from 1 crime to 2. That's a 100% increase. The reason, and I'll touch on them now if it's all right, at the back in Appendix 2 you've got the infographics for the last 2 years. The reason we do that on an annual basis is to give an indication of where it looks like and what sort of trends we've had. The number of incidents is almost identical, 7 difference in a total of 1,655. The number of 999 calls has risen quite a lot, and I'll touch on that when I come to the control room a little bit later on. And the number of people arrested actually fell slightly last year, but the number of crimes went up a little bit. You can see they're broadly the same things in slightly different orders because different numbers went up and down. We went up from, we had 14 burglaries instead of 16, so that was a slight fall. 20 public order offences, disorderly offences instead of 10. You could argue that's a 100% increase, but it's still a small it's still a small number. Theft dropped a little bit from 31 to 22 over the course of the year. Violence against the person went up from 48 to 65. We can track all these things back. The crime recording rules over a period of time do change slightly, so you have to treat it with an element of caution. But we've certainly got good figures going back to 2018, which is when the UTRA system came in, because that's all been done under the same standards. If you would like, for the next one, I can show some of the trends over that period of time. That's a 7-year, or getting on for 7-year period now, so we can track them back that far. It is as I say, it's an indicator. It needs, like any statistic, you need to dig in a little bit more before you decide whether it's actually something that you're going to have to respond to or something you're just going to monitor and see which way it goes. As I say, just touching on it, the number of sex offences went from 23 to 33 in a year. But again, some of that is the rub of the historic cases that will still be coming through for the next year, but by no means. It was probably about 25% of them last year were historic cases that have come forward. So it comes and it goes, but that gives an indication, the top half in terms of the crime and the bottom half in terms of what the police actually dealt with during the course of the year. Just so that people can see what their police service actually does on St Helena. We have looked at doing the same activity on Ascension, but the numbers are so small, it's largely... It has much less meaning, I think. You're the first ones to see this. Now that it's gone, we'll put it out on social media, etc., so that it can be used.
But I think it's something we need to continue to monitor. I don't disagree with the perspective. Let's look at where the trend has gone. But I think it's also worth mentioning the population is reduced. So, you know, lies damn lies statistics. It's very hard to say that is happening, but it does give you a sense of where we are, and I think that's the point. I repeat, it's an early warning indicator of where things may be going.
And one other thing, forgive me, I should have mentioned at this moment, is that one of the other things we track is how many of these offences result in arrests. By this time last year, we'd arrested 24 people in the course of the year, so between January and the end of April 2023. But this year, by today, we've arrested 47. So we've nearly doubled the number of arrests this year. A lot of that is a function of the increase in violent crime. Violent crime almost always comes with a known offender, so frequently there will be an arrest as a result of that. We've also seen quite a lot of an increase in breaches of various orders and bail conditions. All of which counts as an arrest. They won't necessarily reflect on the crime figures because they're a breach of a court order or a bail rather than a crime in themselves.
I think a court order would, because a breach of a court order is an offence.
Yeah, but we've had breach of depots and things like that. Domestic abuse protection orders and various other orders. So it is worthy of note that it's another indicator that things are moving and changing. Individually they're not that significant, but collectively they're starting to show a bit of a trend.
So let's see if we can do a little bit of historic analysis. I'm not asking you to get into the task of a statistician, but for the next meeting, let's see where we go and let's see what we get in terms of the figures. It may just have been a bad quarter. We'll see.
We'll see. In relation to improving public confidence in policing, I've detailed the staffing situations such as they are on both islands. We have had quite a turnover and we are carrying a number of vacancies at the moment. The picture changes. I mean, I mentioned here about when you TC Sergeant due to arrive in April. He's now arrived. So it's we've had a new detective constable start. We've had a change in the command on Ascension Island with Inspector Stevens coming back to St Helena and Inspector Thomas going out there. The work has been ongoing about agreeing a new structure for the policing of Ascension, and the adverts for the sergeant's role for that are going out hopefully this week. We are in a bit of a bind on Ascension at the moment. We've only got one temporary constable on the island with the inspector. He's on a short-term contract. We've just done an international advertising effort for Ascension. We didn't receive a single application. There is an individual on Ascension who has indicated a willingness to join us, again, having worked for us in the past, and that we're going to pursue over the course of the next few days. The Deputy Chief of Police's contract ended at the end of March. He's obviously been not here for most of the past 2 years. We have identified a replacement, but to date we haven't got a confirmed date for that arrival. We've been doing a very active, over the last 3 months, recruitment process for local officers. and we've identified quite a significant number, 8 possibly. We've interviewed 5 already, and there's another 3 to be interviewed. But only one of those 8 actually are residents on St Helena. We are not getting any or virtually no applications from anybody resident on the island. There's plenty of people who are willing to come here and be trained to be a police officer, but not people here who are willing to be trained to be a police officer. So those are going through the recruitment process at the moment, and we hope that we'll be able to commence an initial training course for ideally the 5 officers as soon as possible, but we're aiming for July, with a view to them being operational by mid to late September, and that's going to be supported by 3 TC tutor officers who are going to come over here and help us to develop them. We converted a sergeant's post into a tutor already, and then we got permission, because of the issues that we're currently carrying, to have an uplift of another 2 PCs, so we've recruited an additional 2 tutors. That should give us 4 tutors for 5 constables, which will help speed their development quite considerably, because they'll be able to have a dedicated tutor rather than the sort of peripatetic tutor that we've had to use when we've got 1 tutor and multiple student officers. So that should be a real positive. We are still having difficulties recruiting TC officers from the UK. UK policing, unfortunately, is not desperately understanding of the needs of the overseas territories. Career breaks, which used to be a very popular way of, a very common way of officers being given a 2-year career break from the UK to come out here and assist us, are almost unheard of now. Indeed, the sergeant who's only just arrived was given a career break to come out here, and then a few days, less than a week before he was due to leave, this career break offer was withdrawn, and he was forced to resign his post completely in order to come out and help us. That's been raised whenever we have conversations with the Overseas Territories Policing Advisor. It's an issue for UK policing to address, but it does have an impact on us, probably disproportionately compared to some of the other overseas territories, because we rely more heavily, at the moment at least, until we can develop our local officers, on TCs. Training, it's been quite busy in terms of major training courses in the last few months. We were very fortunate, the FCDO policing advisor was able to give us funding to bring out an investigative practice trainer to here and Ascension Island in February and March. He also delivered training to other staff who were involved in investigations, so some customs officers, the fisheries officers went through the same training as us, so everybody's been trained to a similar standard. 1 week of that training was also aimed specifically at supervisors and specialists, because that equipped them to carry out more complex investigations and also to assess investigations carried out by other staff, a supervisory role. We were also lucky to get funding from the International Police Assistance Service in the Home Office to bring out a crime scene investigation trainer. Our crime scene manager left last year to go to the Falklands. Before she left, she gave some basic training to our staff, but we needed to uplift that. So a CSI trainer came out for a number of weeks and has delivered training to 5 of our staff who have now got their skills much better. And IPAS, I've got a meeting with them on Friday to discuss the support for this year, but the idea is that will be an ongoing commitment to help us bring those on, because as with crime scene investigators, you then, if you have a serious incident, need a manager and different specialisms and things. It also links back into our ability to reach back to the UK for support. In addition, 3 staff out of the 5 that we've been training have now successfully completed their trainer's qualification. That gives them a level 3 internationally recognised qualification to deliver training to officers and staff here. They're all local staff. We've also been delivering personal safety training. If you remember previously I mentioned that we got some of our local officers qualified as personal safety trainers. They've been working obviously through the police personal safety training, but we've also been delivering that similar training, a slightly varied version, to customs immigration staff as well, so that they are brought up to the speed that they should be doing, which is really good for them, and it's also very good for our trainers, because it allows them to develop their skills and look at slightly different ways and different powers and policies. Community policing, as I've highlighted with the numbers, proactive community policing has been quite limited, but cruise ship days have allowed that we've planned to have the maximum number of officers we can on duty. Schools liaison work is also continuing with Carisha Francis, one of our PCs, now having taken on that responsibility. And I mentioned the infographic as well. The Joint Emergency Services Control Centre has a new supervisor, Sharon Furness. She took up the post about 8 weeks ago now, and she's already making a significant difference in this area. It's really pleasing to see. We're in the process of recruiting new operators, and that has actually attracted quite a lot of interest. We've got the interviews for that next week. Again, for your information, I've highlighted the work, how the incidents are classified. It shows all the various emergency services ones of the 437 for the past 3 months, just for your information, and how they're divided up between our various teams and the combination of the other emergency services that we deal with. Ambulance service obviously gets quite a lot of that because they get quite a lot of calls. Complaints and discipline, I referred to 3 complaints previously. They've all been public complaints, they've all been resolved. We've not received any formal complaints over the past 3 months, or at least we haven't at the time I wrote this. I received one this week. But there are also 3 internal disciplinary matters that are currently under investigation, one of which has been subject to a peer review by Hampshire Constabulary. You appreciate there's little I can say about those while they are still under investigation, but when they're completed, I will brief you accordingly. Criminal legislation, again with thanks to Simon and the Minister and others, and we are moving forward, we hope, in relation to online and sexual offences. Indeed, a draft of an ordinance was circulated this week for consideration. It's still
two ordinances.
Two ordinances.
There's 2 that have been circulated for consideration.
Yeah. Legislation to introduce the regulations governing public service vehicle drivers, which is bus and taxi drivers, and to reduce the drink driving. It was also passed by Legislative Council in February, and we expect that will come into force later in the year. I think we're still looking at September-ish for that. And prior to that, there'll be an extensive education campaign, and also for the PSV regulations. There's a lot of preparations that we have to do with them, with the drivers, to get ready for that. I thought it might be interesting to the panel to see the details of the memorandum of understanding that we now have with between the police and the FCDO law enforcement advisor. This sets out what we will receive or have already received in a lot of cases between April 2024 and the end of March 2026, so a 2-year period. The areas covered included victim support, the police firearms range, the review of police capabilities, detective inspector cover for me, with the changeover, police recruitment, the fatal road traffic collision investigation from last year, attendance at a Women in Policing conference and another conference in Miami, purchase of college and policing training materials to enable us to move forward with the training, and the delivery of the professionalising investigative practice training. Most of those have either been completed or delivered, and the last few are partially completed. The funds to allow the installation of CCTV, I think I already mentioned that in Ascension they've already been spent and that work's been completed. It is, we are, and I am personally extremely grateful for the support we get from the FCDO. It does help us continue to move the service forward, and it's vital that we take the best advantage of that we possibly can. OTRIS, which is the Overseas Territories Crime and Intelligence System, which is what we use for just that. The testing continues in order to assess the viability of moving to the newer cloud-based OTRIS system. Our adoption has now been linked to the Falklands as well. At the moment, myself and Ascension both use the system and just do the Falklands, but they're 3 separate systems. If we move to the cloud-based system, we will have one system for us and Ascension, which will be really useful. When Ascension sadly had their fatal road traffic collision last October, trying to track what was happening there while from here was very difficult because there was a very long delay in the information coming through. So there's a lot of testing going on at the moment. We believe that St Helena and Ascension should both be fine, certainly once Ascension commissions the Starlink system and we can integrate that into it. But the Falcons results have been very inconsistent. Some days they seem to be absolutely fine, and other days they're more struggle. But the plan is still, with the FCDO project team that are delivering this, to move to it during the course of the year.
One comment on your previous point, that actually gets caught, just to specify that there is a good additional pipes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I know I touched on it in relation to the crime scene investigation training, but support now comes from two avenues. The FCDO Policing Advisor has responsibility for certain elements, and the International Police Assistance Service can provide others. Generally, a lot of the training stuff would come through IPAS, like CSI. We had disaster victim identification, if you remember, a year ago, last February as well, from them. In relation to the crime figures and detection rates, you'll see at Appendix A the figures for the year, for the 3-month period for St Helena and for a 4-month period for Ascension. I think I've already probably highlighted the numbers. In relation to detections, there are 24 different reasons why a crime can be detected. Breaking this out into the reasons for all those detections will make a very large table. If you want that, then I can do it. Most of them are because somebody has been charged, summoned, cautioned, has had the offence taken into consideration, although that's relatively rare here. There's been a community resolution or those type of issues that have resulted in it. I thought, actually, when I started looking at it, the more interesting thing was how many cases we are still carrying as under investigation, because they will eventually, hopefully, turn into detections, and also it's a function of the amount of work that the officers are actually carrying at the moment. The increase in violent crime has meant that of the 24 offences, we've still got 800 investigations. Oh, and the other thing I should have mentioned is obviously detections can sometimes come through late. So a detection this month isn't necessarily from a crime this month, it might be from a crime a month ago or 2 or 3 months ago. Looking down the under investigations, the assaults, and that's just simply volume, that there are still some of those issues going through. The biggest one we wanted to highlight was the number of investigations in relation to sexual offences. It is becoming increasingly more complex to investigate those offences as the number of online offences increase. They are challenging at best. When we can download the devices here, we still cannot unlock and crack devices if they are locked by the alleged offender. We have to send them away to the UK, and that builds in a significant time lag. Getting them to the UK is a challenge because they have to be couriered there, and then we have to get them dealt with by a commercial company and then returned to us. So we are carrying more.
The forensic inquiries often take time as well, David. I think it's fair to say on the investigation.
And rape offences where they have forensic evidence to prove or disprove contact between individuals, similarly have to go off to the UK to be tested, and then they have to come back again. So it's worthy of note that while looking at it, of the 68 offences, we've only detected 31 during the period of 3 months. We've also got another 35 that still may turn into a detection. It is a higher number than I would like, and we are doing what we can to bring those numbers down, but the nature of it, and particularly the sexual offences, they will take sometimes months, if not longer, to actually move forward. The number of offences on Ascension is... It is what it is. There's not a great deal to report there. Thankfully, it's a very peaceful place, and you can see the contrast in the number of incidents as well. I've talked about the ongoing investigations. The victim support scheme, I've just mentioned that the FCDO funded, allocated £2,000 to the victim support scheme to support that for this year, and that's now been invoiced and hopefully should be paid this week or next. Road traffic collisions, we've had 13 road traffic collisions, 3 involving injury on St Helena during the past 3 months. That's not very different from last year. The number of road traffic collisions and the number of injuries may The actual number across the whole year has dropped slightly. The number of injuries has remained virtually constant. Unfortunately, there are means of reducing injuries in road traffic collisions, but seatbelts are still not covered in the law. There were also 3 collisions on Ascension between November and February, but there were thankfully no injuries there. The regulations for the fixed penalty scheme have now been finalised, and the paper will be presented to Executive Council for approval and enactment before the end of this Council.
And we've gone through Appendix 2.
Yes.
And I think Appendix 3 is fairly self-evident, unless there's anything you should pull out. I think what Appendix 3 does show is just how effective the control centre is in providing a total service for all of St Helena. And the fact that we have this joint control room is something that regularly receives compliment as an integrated way of doing business. This is not replicated in every territory, let's leave it that way. Any questions of the Chief on his police and crime panel report in the room? Simon, any question? Okay, thank you for that. That then takes us to questions from the panel. We have one pre-notified question, it tells me at the bottom here, from Alex, to be put forward by the Secretariat. So, Sam.
I'm sure you asked me to read them. So, yes, Alex, you're sending apologies, and he has asked to raise the question about whether the panel will receive us reports, who's done when they visited, and obviously the overview plan and they all need to start.
They're both very fair questions, and I don't know.
So there has been there was an initial draft of the IPAS report that went back with comments on it. There's been a revised draft that I think has come out relatively recently that needs to then be reconsidered.
Right. Okay.
So I'm not sure if you...
That's the IPAS.
That's the IPAS one.
I've not seen the IPAS one.
I will make sure you've got that.
Okay.
Yep.
I know we're still waiting for Andrew Monday's report. I mean, to be honest with you, in terms of Andrew's report, much of what he said we've actioned anyway. But it would be very helpful to have the report, not least for you to be able to view it and for it to be publicly available. And Andrew is widely considered to be an extraordinarily capable and helpful person. It's also the case that thanks to things that we do not experience in this territory, but in the Caribbean, he's also extremely busy and is coordinating a significant number of high priority activities for those territories, including provision of armed police. You get the idea, it's very, very difficult. I have huge sympathy, fully understand, but we do need to get the report. I'm reticent to push too hard, but we need to get it, and I recognise this panel would want to see it really not in the not too distant future. And it is also the case that when we get the new chief will clearly want to have sight of that report. So yes, we'll keep going. Please send me the IPAS draft. Still not complete then, okay. So I hope that's an adequate answer for Alex. Any other questions from the panel?
Council report, is it possible that we get the report a week before we leave? Now, maybe it's like something you find to go through the report and actually scrutinise the project. I think it's got the best, so ideally I would have liked to clear that out before the council was reading.
That's a fair shout. It was slow coming out this time, for which apologies. But yeah, that's a fair shout. Totally agree.
Because when I gave information, sounders in my complete my head, 3 times over research.
Okay.
Then there was the council, the staff, so it's just about the staff. But they says that you get an additional 2 PCs, like that. So I can't remember what was the number of PCs that you do it.
We would
I would estimate it's now 2 PCs based on a week.
I will circulate, if it's okay, sir, I will circulate a structure diagram to you all so you can see exactly what we've got now and what it will look like when we have the new people in post.
Right.
But to answer your question, we've generally had one tutor constable who's been a TC, one at the police constable level, and we had 3 TC sergeants.
Yeah.
We converted one because we needed more tutors rather than an extra sergeant because we're only running 2 teams, so we converted one post from a sergeant to a PC, which is a slight reduction in cost. That was the plan anyway. The recent issues that we've had with numbers and the fact that we're trying to recruit quite a lot, we got permission to bring forward an extra 2 technical cooperation constables, which we've managed to find them with tutor skills as well. So what I hope will be a relatively short term, i.e. a year or two's uplift, because if we can keep the local officers developing the way they're going at the moment, one of the other advantages of them being here, and one of them is actually has run training courses for tutor constables, is we can pass on their tutoring skills to our local officers, and then our local officers will develop new local officers rather than us bringing in expat officers to develop local officers.
That's what the TC programme is supposed to do.
It's supposed to do, yeah. It's supposed to pass on skill.
Which is rather novel.
So, by all this instruction, you got those some so forth. You say something about there's probably 8 potential officers even for in terms of putting them out, you go into account.
Well, they've been offered jobs at the moment and they're going through the clearing process, so I hope they'll turn up.
Yeah.
When he says in that
Yeah, they're getting their fees or something like that.
The local officers we're recruiting, of the 5 that we've currently offered jobs to, 4 of them are off Ireland at the moment.
Yeah.
So they obviously have to make their own way here. So because their local contracts do not come with any travel expenses. So we've explained throughout the process to them that is their responsibility, is to make their way here. But we're waiting to see whether or not they come back. No, we haven't had a single saint who's applied for these jobs. We have got, although I should have mentioned, the detective constable who we've appointed, who's on his way back, he is of Saint heritage. His father still lives here. He left here as at school age, but he's been back regularly. He's coming back as a detective constable with us, and hopefully we'll be back here within the next 3 or 4 months.
So, maybe something that you probably need to follow up in terms of HR, which falls under the recruitment, the disrupting the recruitment process. So, like, we're bringing in people at the moment for health, education, and relocation candidates and stuff.
And we've asked exactly that question, to have sight of the relocation packages and know whether we can access them as well. But we haven't had an answer yet.
100% 5 people over here, the one doing lip service and be sure, then it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fair shout. As the Chief says, we're trying to see what's possible.
But it's got to be consistent with what, as you say, Minister, with what Health have offered. So we need to know, and I know Health have moved things like they've got shared houses for groups of their individuals, again, to cut down on the housing costs. That may well be an option that we can pursue. A couple of the individuals who we've appointed have friends or relations on the island, albeit they're not saints, they know people who are here, so that might assist them. But we've asked them to look at it as an urgent matter, because obviously we're still at relatively early stage. They were only interviewed in the last 10 days. And if it does start to become a problem, and we do have access to that, then certainly we'll be trying to use that kind of relocation system.
But not to comment specifically on the policing, we all know the fragility of the recruiting here. It is extremely difficult. The police are in no way immune from it. But we are, and I'm grateful to you, Chief, for saying you'll distribute the organisation chart. But we are carrying a lot of gaps. And it's
definitely about the HR, because we should have consistency around the services.
waging agreement.
It's nice to see that. the way coming down.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed on the chart as well, you know, back on the Helena road, that we've got a cap and now even fully. We've got 5 pieces of cap, no captions, and now an investigation. So is there another column that should be in here to say no offence established or?
No, the crime recording rules are now, if somebody says something has been stolen, we have to believe them unless they can be proved not to be the case. So those are those are things where people have told us they've had property removed, and we can't necessarily identify any potential offenders, and there are no further lines of inquiry to follow. We can't say that it wasn't a crime.
So my point means that should be another column in here to say cases closed or something like that. Yeah, well, also now you have 5, then I have to slot out straight out, so you have 5 cases.
They're not currently under investigation.
Right.
So they're not currently under investigation. They have been investigated, but they're not. There's nothing more we can do with them.
And they'll never be detected because there's never an offender established.
No, and they don't meet any of the criteria to have a detection. If we can investigate something and it turns out that it wasn't a crime, for example, if somebody says that their lawnmower's gone missing and it turns out a neighbour's borrowed it and brings it back again, then we can know crime and it won't appear in these statistics at all. Sometimes there is a bit of a lag in that because the lawnmower doesn't come back for a little while afterwards. But generally, the crime recording rules changed quite significantly about 3 years ago. If a victim says they've had a crime committed, we believe them. In years gone by, not just this police service, but other police services would tend to adopt an element of scepticism if somebody said that their mobile phone had gone missing from their pocket and it must have been stolen. It might have been recorded as lost property instead of a theft. If somebody now says they've had their pocket picked, we believe that they've had their pocket picked because they are the victim, and they're the rules that we follow.
Yeah, I just to here's the comments and
Well, as I say, forgive me, we probably should say currently under investigation rather than just under investigation, because all offences here, we are in the pleasant might not be the right word, we are in this position on St Helena where we can actually investigate every offence. In higher demand areas, perhaps some offences are screened out virtually immediately as not having any solvability factors. Here, every offence will have been looked at, and there will be a comprehensive record against each crime of what we've tried to do for it. So they will have been investigated. It's just obviously in certain cases, and simple thefts are probably the most obvious one, where sometimes if there isn't a witness to the theft actually occurring, it's very difficult to actually prove or disprove who's involved.
So do you have a period we keep it open until?
We keep it open until we've exhausted all the inquiries.
So within that 3-month period, you close service and come on?
Yeah, but they will still be, they're still recorded, so if further information comes to light later on, those offences can go back and be and still be dealt with. They're not closed off forever. None of these are ever closed off forever. They're like an ongoing thing. So if somebody comes back and a particularly identifiable piece of property has been stolen, and that appears 6 or 12 or 18 months down the line, we'll still go back and detect that offence. But the detection will show against the month that it was detected in, not against where the crime was.
I understand about this, but on that front, when you got at this from perception, it looks like the police didn't do anything wrong, you actually did something.
Yeah, but as I say,
I think it's answered.
Sorry, sir.
Any more questions, Minister?
Just something that was raised, we've probably been on the website at the moment, so we've got some or whatever, and we don't have an agenda on our website. And then sort of we sort of summary that's what you sent us. And you didn't see like an agenda, so this is supposed to be a chief communication board, 3 members of the town.
Sam, would you be able to look at that for me? Okay, thank you. Anything else, Minister?
And from piece of work, Should I ask you about? I think a couple of other issues raised as well on social media through saying that complaints, the complaints they previously made complaints against police and suggestion, corruption. I just want to know about education. I was coming up with this what we did do at one stage was carry on the Hampshire to the investigations for certain things. Probably a little bit more information going on in there. Otherwise, it seems like the police doing their own thing. It's not the case. They didn't want police to be sold out in areas.
As you appreciate, Minister, responding to some of the things that get posted on social media is fraught with risk. Some of those allegations have a basis in fact, some of them don't. Some individuals, no matter what, we do respond to them, but not necessarily online, but those responses are ineffective and just prompt further comments. They tend to be the most vociferous ones online. We do go out regularly with how to make complaints against the police, and if you want to make a complaint, the purpose of this panel and giving you the update on where the complaints were was for that purpose, to try and make sure that people understand that those complaints are followed through. What we can't guarantee is that people are happy with the outcome. We can investigate a complaint and do a thoroughly professional job, but if it's not what the person wants, then it'll still be wrong, and they will still take to social media to say that, no matter how many times you do it. So we do monitor it, and where we can, we will contact the individuals directly, because I don't believe in engaging in necessarily public correspondence in relation to some of these things.
No, I was suggesting to get them off there.
Yeah. But
so we give them education
we cycle it through our website on a regular, our Facebook page on a regular basis about what to do with complaints. And I don't know what more we can do with that. As I say, there are some individuals who, no matter what we do, it will always be wrong.
Yeah. Indeed. Great. Thank you. Sorry. Right. That takes us to... sorry, my apologies. Simon, anything from yourself?
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. No, nothing from me. I will just say that I've not been able to follow the discourse that's been going on, so I'll catch up when I see the minutes. I can hear audio from your side of the room going out. I can't hear any impression that's from the other side of the room.
Fair shout. Probably going to be trained to project. No problem. Okay, I'm going to run around for AOB. Simon.
Not for it.
Yes. Sam? Yep. Simon, any AOB?
No, sir.
No, thank you.
This, sadly, is Simon's last police and crime panel. I just want to, on behalf of us all, thank you, Simon, for the work you've done. Not just on the police and crime panel, and there will be a number of iterations of thank you, but for all the work you've done. You know, it's an important role that you have, and given the nature of some of the offences, it's also at times, I'm sure, a very demanding role to have. Mm-hmm. And on behalf of us all, thank you for your efforts. I also want to acknowledge the exceptionally good work that's occurred between yourself as the prosecutor and the police to try and make sure we get to the right place. It's the sort of collaboration that you wish to see to make sure we get the right outcome. So again,
thank you very much on that. I'd just like to thank the police for all the support that they've given me throughout my time here, and the working relationship that I've had with them has been absolutely second to none. The amount of effort and hard work that the police do put into solving crime in very challenging circumstances, particularly recently with the difficulties in recruitment, is to be applauded, and the results that we achieve speak for themselves.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I'm just conscious of timescales, so this government breaks at the end of June. There'll be 6 weeks for the elections. We'll then have a new government from the 3rd of September. They'll probably need a little bit of time to bed in. So I propose for the sitting panel members, Minister, you may be back, but let's see, that's of course to the people of the island. Might I suggest we target October for the next one of these? It's not quite quarterly, but it's probably the best we could do given the context. Is that agreeable? And we'll have a new prosecutor, and we'll have a new chief. But so that makes this your last one as well.
Indeed, sir.
Sure, okay. Just go through my own assessment there. Do we agree October?
Don't look at that. I don't think those need.
Okay, fair share.
I can't comment either.
We'll make it October, which means I have to give a second thanks. Because then this has just become your last police and crime panel.
I see.
It's premature to get too far into this, but in terms specifically of the police and crime panel, the chief has been an absolutely pivotal part of bringing this forward, and this ambition of greater transparency, the opportunity to ensure that there is a proper dialogue about what goes on with regard to policing, the discussion we had earlier about where trends are taking us. All of this is as a consequence of the work that you've done, both in the creation of the Police and Crime Report and the creation of this panel. So there will be times to talk about other components of your role, but in this specifically, though, it's right that we acknowledge the work that you've done to get us to where we are. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
And ladies and gentlemen, having said farewell to two, I'm not going to say farewell to you. That would be because that's for the election. So I'll simply say we will convene in October. I look forward to see you as who is here. And on that basis, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Good afternoon.